Hello folks! Now, as much as we have really documented and journaled a large portion of this country already on our adventures on the coverage project, not just this tour, but all of the tours, I am merely just the last of a long string of explorers who precede me in journaling, documenting, and observing this great country, from its natural geography to the people who live here, to the culture and customs. Yeah, I'm not alone. There are plenty of people in American history who have done just this, and I'm sure if they had access to an HD camera, they would have just done something pretty similar to what we are doing on the coverage project. One of the most famous of these historic explorers were Lewis and Clark, the famous duo who explored the vast western frontier of America to let this young country know what lay beyond the Mississippi River. After a year's worth of travel from St. Louis to the Oregon coast, accompanied by a whole crew of both enlisted men and other people who knew their way around this country for as little information as there was, Lewis and Clark reached the end of the line, the Pacific coast, and it was getting cold, so they decided to set up camp here along a little river that will lead to the Columbia River. They thought that they would just be lifted onto a ship that came by, and they would be able to sail all the way back home to the east of the American country. But that ship did not come, and they had to winter the cold and rainy Oregon winter right here. Not the worst place to be stuck for a winter. At worst, it was just freezing rains, nothing like a couple feet worth of snow, but it wasn't pleasant. A fort was built by the Lewis and Clark crew to protect not only themselves, but a lot of the items and sensitive resources that they had collected along the journey, because these elements, they can get pretty brutal when it's very, very rainy. Now keep in mind, they were equipped with technology from the early 1800s, so they weren't lounging around watching TV shows all winter. No, they were really roughing it out here. So this is the countryside in which they set up shop. They set up a fort, Fort Clatsop, named after the Clatsop natives, which inhabited this northern stretch of the Oregon coast. So essentially, you can call this area of Fort Clatsop the final stop for the official Lewis and Clark journey. This was the end. You can't go further west than the ocean, which is just a few miles in whatever direction we're trying to aim for today. But yeah, I wanted to start this video off in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark at the Lewis and Clark National Historic Park. Because after all, we are explorers here on the coverage project. So to me, personally, it's an honor to be walking in the footsteps, in the shadows of these great Lewis and Clark explorers. These two explorers, for all the risks they faced and underwent along their famous journey, earned them a title as one of the greatest explorers in American history. So important that their final little landing for the winter is called the Lewis and Clark River. Simple as that. Now, this event is not an insignificant one. It's not just a bunch of people going camping for the winter here on the Oregon coast 200 years ago. No, this is the beginning of what people consider the American presence in the state of Oregon. And just a few short years later, after the Lewis and Clark expedition, the first settlement permanently inhabited in Oregon's history would be established. That's right, we're going back in time, before the Oregon Trail. We're going to learn the history today of Astoria, Oregon's oldest settlement. All right, we've made it to the downtown, and this little park is where Astoria history as we know it, regarding the settlement, began. This is Fort Astoria. John Jacob Astor was a wealthy entrepreneur from New York City, and he owned the Pacific Fur Company, which gained a lot of profit from being located here and taking advantage of the local wildlife that had fur. It was a hot commodity in the early 1800s. Everybody wanted those fur coats and felt hats, and this was the region of the country where you could certainly hunt those animals down and get their fur. Now, the first group of people to establish this place as a trading post was a group of people who sailed all around the Americas. They circumnavigated all the landmass down even around Cape Horn, the southernmost point of South America, just to get around to the Pacific Northwest. The Panama Canal was not built yet, so that was the only way explorers could get from Europe or even the eastern part of America all the way to the west. Now obviously the original fort cannot last this long in such rainy weather that really degrades the quality of the wood needed to build these, so this is obviously a replica, but you can see the amount of pride that the inhabitants of Astoria take in their community and their history. Fort George, wait, that's a little bit different of a name from Fort Astoria. That's right, eventually this area, Astoria, was sold to a different company, a Canadian company, under that time the British Crown. So technically this was under the dominion of the British. The Union Jack stands over there. Yeah, that's right. For the first half of the 19th century, the Pacific Northwest was not officially under American control yet. There was influence, of course, but it was an area that was under a joint compromise, a loose compromise between America and Britain. Some of you might be able to guess that Fort Astoria was named after the guy who generally owned the company, John Jacob Astor. But the British, they had other plans for the naming convention. They called it Fort George, of course, as the sign suggests. So as you can see here, two different countries, the US and Britain, operating in the same general area with a similar industry, but the profits they accumulated went to different endpoints. This was all established in the year of 1811, which means that Fort Astoria is not only the oldest settlement city in Oregon, but it's the first American settlement west of the Rocky Mountains. The funny thing is, today, the site on which the original Fort Astoria, Fort George, was placed on is now serving today's people of Astoria in a different way than the fur industry. It's a brewery, it's a tap room. That's one way to preserve history, I guess. As Astoria fell into American territory, definitively, officially, and grew in size and population, so did the story of Astoria grow. We're looking at the Columbia River at its greatest width, right before it enters the Pacific Ocean, and these waters were used for various industries, namely the fishing industry and the fish processing industry. And these jobs required a big workforce. Luckily though, there was plenty of immigration that came to Astoria. All across Astoria you will find little park units and memorials And these are dedicated to the heritage of various immigrant groups who came from these waters onto the land of Astoria to work in the various industries. Namely, what we saw was the Astoria Nordic Heritage Park. People from Finland, Sweden, Iceland, Norway, and Denmark came here and they worked the fishing. And then there was the group of people from China who primarily worked in the canning industry. In these waters of the Columbia River, there's fish everywhere, and when you catch them, they only last for so long. You gotta preserve them. And more so, you might make a profit from sending it all around the country. So people would work in these fish, salmon and tuna canneries. More so, did you know that the famous seafood company, Bumblebee Tuna, was once based here in Astoria? That's right. Guess what state's on this side of the Columbia? Past the fog. So close, yet so far. Maybe tomorrow will be a different day. Hey! Astoria clock. Overall, what can I say? It's one of those maritime seaside towns. Plenty of shops on the dock, plenty of things to attract any tourist, plenty of bars, plenty of restaurants, plenty of places to get merchandise if that's your thing. I will say though, one thing very, very unique to Astoria is they really know how to paint their trash cans. It's got tons of historic imagery, just as you would see on a historic can of tuna or sardines. Yeah, I really appreciate that touch. Anything to add flavor to an otherwise crappy part of a town. You know, nobody really should pay attention to the trash cans unless they look beautiful. Look at them, they're all over the place. Astoria brand, Columbia River salmon. Nice to know that the history of this place is still preserved in odd ways. And another golden anchor salmon from the Columbia River. Guys, I know we go to a lot of cemeteries, believe me. I'm not a morose person by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think it's the respectful thing to do here on the Coverage Project to visit these historic cemeteries full of history that's largely swept under the rug, really. The names on some of these graves can be traced back to the beginning of Astoria's history, just like any other pioneer cemetery would. Old names, old birth and death dates. Really give you a glimpse of not only how old this city is, but sometimes the manner in which the people lived here. Sometimes short lives were lived due to various complications or injuries or sickness. You know, it was a wild experience to live here out in the frontier. So yeah, it's not only an interesting thing to take a glance at what people's lives were like and the way in which script is written through the ages, just a fun little thing to check out how graves are through the years. Not only is it really interesting, but I think it's the respectful thing to do, to honor the first founders, the first pioneers of Astoria who built this city from nothing, who risked life and limb, a tremendous amount, just to get here, let alone scrape by in a frontier environment, to try their luck at some success. How much undiscovered, unrecorded history lies beneath these soils where the souls of the departed of Astoria lie. Not only is it clear that this cemetery is a subject of old cemeteries from all over the country, going through a long process of wear and tear, and it's not a matter of whether or not this will continue to wear and tear, but how slow or how fast the process is going to be. Not only that, these grounds also contain numerous unmarked graves of people we'll never know, names we'll never know, dates we'll never know. Once again, I'm not trying to be morbid or pessimistic or anything. I just think this is a cool hidden area in Astoria to discover. I mean, after all, who knows how many souls over here were once sailors or fishermen aboard along the Columbia River that shaped Astoria to become the legendary, historic city that it is. Check it out. This is an amazing view of our surrounding area. Columbia River, of course. Lewis and Clark River over there from the beginning of today. And it just goes to show you the scale of how large everything is and how minuscule we are compared to the land around us. From the ancient trade routes that linked the local Clatsop people here to the rest of the Columbia Plateau natives, to Lewis and Clark's core of discovery, to the Oregon Trail, to anyone visiting like us. This area serves a tremendous historical and cultural significance. This is essentially the last stop one can make going west into the Pacific Northwest before they reach the mighty Pacific Ocean up ahead. In the era of early American exploration, the areas surrounding Astoria, leading inland into the Columbia Plateau, has always served for the European explorers as an unknown frontier full of mystery. But the development of Astoria as that once great port city on the Oregon coast has given tremendous wealth and knowledge pertaining to this area. And that's why I wanted to give this location, Astoria, a little bit of love today as we venture out of Oregon. This is our final stop, at least for now, in Oregon. I might do a little thing like we did in California in a little while, but for now, we're gonna take a break from Oregon. So I think it's only fitting that the place which gave Oregon such a great and fascinating reputation is the place we end our journeys in Oregon for now. Now, although Astoria today only has a population of 10,000 people or so, and it's been overshadowed by a lot of other coastal Pacific Northwest cities like Portland and Seattle, I still think this place deserves a lot of respect on any tourist's itinerary. By now you'll know that I try to end every day on a high note, sometimes figuratively with a nice story, or literally in case of great views from above. Today it's going to be the latter. There's one place that every local in Astoria knows is worth the great view. This is the Astoria Column. It was built almost a century ago in 1926, and this is our ticket to a great view to end the day. Up close you can even see the history, the entire history of Astoria, illustrated in fun little paintings, drawings. Well, I'll have you know it's a beautiful late afternoon here at Astoria. A little bit overcast, but what do you expect? We're in the Pacific Northwest, right along the coast. It's not gonna be bright and sunny. No, it's gonna look like this. It's actually extremely windy up here. but I shouldn't expect anything else. We're high up above the surface where winds are a lot more powerful. Nothing to protect us from the winds. But yeah, an exciting time to be here on the coverage project as we continue forth on our Best of the Most West trip. We'll be across that river, and before you know it, we'll be in our 47th state. That's right, 4 more states to go. This is how many? Just 4. And then we have done it. We've never been closer to getting all 50 states. So yeah, I'll just close it off with that. Eager to enter our 47th state. Anticipating a little less wind. Maybe, who knows what the weather's gonna be. At the top of this mighty tower overlooking a beautiful Astoria and Columbia River. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.